I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Digging Deeper. My name is Pastor Bradley Martin, and I'm excited that you have joined us for another episode. And we're actually going to start a new Bible study today. As you see, it is called Profiled. And I'm so excited to share with you a little bit about what God has been working in me during my study, about what it truly means to be called a Christ follower. And we'll explain that a little bit as we go along. Today's going to be an introductory session. And so we'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen in the next few weeks as we study through what it truly means to be called a follower of Christ. Um, if this is your first time joining us, let me say welcome. This Bible study is intended to help you as a course of study. You can, of course, use this in any form or fashion. You can use it for personal study. You can use it for a group study if you have a small group in your family or whatever. And you can always go back and look at and listen to these these episodes. These are in video form on our social media platforms, and also you can find it under your favorite podcasting streaming whatever um, service if you choose to listen to it in that form. So just let me encourage you to do so. If that be the case, if you are watching this in the years to come, this should be here as long as this mode of media is available. And again, we are excited that you are joining us today. If you are hearing some loud noise in the back, I'm not really sure what I was going to come through. I am recording this at school, and there are some projects going on around the building, and so there are some noise going on. So I do apologize for that, but hopefully it won't be that big of a distraction today as we are going through this introductory lesson. Again, I'm excited about um, this study. I don't really have in the past we've done different books of the Bible. We've gone through different themes. I don't really have a jumping off verse per se. I've got a few of them that I'm going to share with you today. But we will look in the coming weeks, and this will make more sense, I hope, after we go through this introductory um, session today. And hopefully we can tie it all together in the coming weeks. But again, I'm excited that you've joined us here. And again, if you have any comments or anything, please feel free to leave those, like and subscribe and share and do all that good kind of stuff in the podcasting world and the social media forum. So the more you share it, the more you like it, the more it pops up on other people's forms of social media as well. Again, it's nothing about me. It's nothing about really. It's nothing about me. It's all about trying to get the word out about us digging deeper into the word. So, with that being said, let's kind of jump in. Kind of where I came up with the word profiled. Let me give you a little backstory. As I'm getting older, of course, my parents are getting older, and I've been thinking a lot, especially about my dad. He's in his 80s now, um, and I want to do a project kind of about him eventually, and kind of tie it in to what he's taught me. But the name Profile actually comes from a nickname that he was given way back when, and there are differing versions of this story. Of course, the more you get away from the original source, the change in stories happen. But when he was first working, he's worked for many different things. He's worked for construction companies, and then he retired working for the city here for many years. And he ended up being in charge of several groups of people, and he'll tell you that's what he's good at right now is being a supervisor and giving out orders and telling people what to do. But in amongst all that, he was called Profile, and I've heard that from a certain group of people, and many of those people that called him Profile have gone on to be with the Lord. But there's one or two of those left that have called him Profile. And I've asked him many times kind of where this came from, and the gist of it is that when he was either when they were creating a ball field here in town, or he was laying out possibly drainage or something for a ball field or whatever, he would take a profile of that and would use his arms and use his mind to see where he wanted where that needed his best place to be, and that was kind of where the name profile came from. And he'd always do certain mannerisms or whatever. I'm sure other people can tell you a lot better form of that than I can, but basically that's where I came up with profile. So having a profile can be both a positive and a negative. If you are whatever you are, you are profiled. Now, again, most of you know that I teach, and so part of the South Carolina State education system is they have what's called a profile of a high school graduate. And so when a student graduates, this is what that student should be. This is what that student should be able to do. This is what they should have taken. This is where they should be prepared to either go into the to a higher education, whether it be college or technical college, or be ready for a career. And so that's where that profile comes to be. And they should have certain classes that they took. They should be competent in these areas. So that means that they should look like a certain thing. They should be able to do some things. They should be able to do certain math, English, science, social studies, and all that kind of stuff. We've also seen people profiled in a negative way. When people profile you based on just not, this is not an exhaustive list, but if they profile you over your skin color, your race, your gender, that may be a negative thing. And so I was thinking back to when I first started teaching. I had a gentleman named Coach Jimmy Tao, who many of you may know. He just recently passed away and went on to be with the Lord as well after fighting a difficult battle with cancer. When I first started teaching, I've many of you know that I worked in the school for about 10 years before I started teaching. Before I went into the classroom, but he asked me to be coach. And I've coached several different things in my coaching career. I've coached, of all things, I was a cross country coach for a year. Of course, I coached volleyball, but I've also coached some very difficult things, and usually it's not the type of things that a lot of people are knocking on the door to coach. And that's no offense to the girls in this case, but it just the way it always seemed to be. They always found it difficult to find a JV girls basketball coach or a JV girls soccer coach, and I ended up being both of those things for a number of years. And Coach Tao was a great mentor to me as I grew up coaching, and I had coached when I was in college. I coached football at Seneca because I thought that's what I wanted to be at the time. And of course, God had some different plans, and went to seminary, and then kind of came full circle back that I would actually be a coach, and now I've kind of moved away from that role and gone more into to refereeing and officiating. But I always admired Coach Tao, and one of the things that he told me early on, because he was a PE teacher, so he coached gym at the high school for several years, and I always thought that was and I still think, no offense to PE teachers, if you are one, please don't take offense to this, but it just seemed like a much easier job because most of the time you kind of got this idea that they're rolling a ball out there and saying go at it. Now I know that's not totally accurate. And I know there's a lot of planning and in depth about that. So a little tongue in cheek about that. But one of the things that he taught me was that he used that time in PE to really scout out girls that could help him in basketball. He was a varsity basketball coach and was very successful for a number of years. Went deep into the playoffs. Several of those years played for a couple of state championships. But they he told me that he would always, he had ninth grade PE, and of course those were some difficult classes, but he would always find two or three or four girls that didn't think that they could play or didn't know that they could play or nobody had any thought of before. And really, he looked at their athleticism, whether they could move like an athlete, but he also looked at kind of their stature. So their height, their length. And so he would, in essence, profile them to see if they fit what the profile of a basketball player might be or what he could make them into. And really, it's even difficult now, especially in some schools. There are some teams that are difficult to fill out roster spots, and JV girls was one of those. And so you had to find these girls that they may never play on your varsity team, but they can really help move your junior varsity team along, which feeds into your varsity team. If you didn't have these girls that played, you wouldn't have a team. And that would be very detrimental to your overall program. So he, in essence, was using that time to profile those girls. Now, some of those would work out, and some of those wouldn't work out, and we'd have some discipline problems every now and then. But for the most part, those girls would help me out, and we never were scoring, a lot of points, but we won a lot of games because we didn't allow a lot of points. Wasn't the most exciting brand of basketball per se, but in some ways we were pretty successful because he was able to profile, in essence, those girls that might not think themselves as players. Now, what happens when we have these preconceived ideas or images or presuppositions about things when those don't work out? Let me tell you a little story. And I've done this in several different areas, but I want to this is pretty recent actually. When I go and I referee volleyball games now, especially I've done this in the past as well, but this is fresh for me because it just happened not too long ago. When you get your assignments for refereeing, of course they give you the address, and of course we live in a world now where technology is such that we have GPSs on our phones. We can type things in. I can remember, and I'm 49 years old, and to some that's old, but to some I'm still just a baby. But I can remember when we had to print off MapQuest addresses and directions and things, or when we didn't even have that at all. We really had to break out a map and hope for the best and try to call and get directions. But when you are going to some of these schools, the address is going to take you to the parking lot. And sometimes that's all that you'll get. And you don't know where the gymnasium is that you have to get to, in my case, to referee a volleyball game. And often you can look for signs, for literal signs that will point you into the direction of the gym. And sometimes there are no signs. Sometimes I went to a school at the end of the season, and it was actually in Greenville, fairly large school, but there were no signs that would say the gymnasium or anything athletic is in any kind of ways. And I had to, and you can sometimes you can look around a building and see where the biggest building is, and often those biggest buildings are signs or their images that your mind can direct you to where you want to go. Um, but sometimes you just have to take a chance, and you just have to, like, I went into the front of the school, and thankfully, once you see somebody there taking up money for admissions, you kind of know that you're in the right direction. But there were times that I don't know where I'm going. And I can remember Mia and I went on a trip not too long ago, a couple years ago, to Las Vegas. We had never been. Just one of those bucket list things. I guess we had some opportunity to go, so we went. And I've been in Atlanta airport several times, and even as big as that is, I can pretty much find my way around. I had never been. I think it's called Harry Reid Airport in Las Vegas. So going is not a big deal because you get off the airplane and you follow the signs um, to go get your rental car and all that kind of stuff. Well, when you get ready to come back and it looks totally different, the direction that you're going. Um, I remember that we had to find our gate. We had difficulties finding the gate, and then you get to the gate, and then they make changes on you, and then you're in the wrong place, and you have to go. And so you're looking for these signs, right? And so if you're not careful, it can put you in the totally wrong place. Now, us guys, we're not real big on asking, excuse me, directions anyway. Um, and GPSs have helped us when we're looking for those signs. And again, I hope you're getting that I'm putting all this visual together, whether it's a profile of a person or it's a sign or it's anything that's visual that will cause your mind to think of whatever or wherever you're trying to go. Now, when we were in Vegas, we had it was in the spring. I think it was in spring break a couple of years ago. It was again beautiful. We'd never been there, but we could see snow. We could see snow all the way around us, kind of out in the mountains. So we decided that we would try to drive there. We could see it, but we had no way of getting, like, you can't put in the GPS directions to the snow. You have to know where you're going. You have to know which direction you're going. You have to know your destination. We could see the snow, but unfortunately, we can never get to the snow because every road we thought that was leading there would turn off into another direction. We saw a lot of different things. We saw things like the new Raider Stadium. Of course, we're driving up and down downtown Strip and all that kind of stuff. But we never could get to the snow because we just never could figure out where all that was going. Now, I say all that um, to say what are what are you visually giving to people? Now, when Jesus, well, before I get to that, let me make sure my thing's working here. Okay, so a profile, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is as a noun is two different things, and you can look these things up. It is an outline of something, especially a person's face as seen from one side, or it's a short article giving a description of a person or organization. So basically, what all that boils down to is when you have a profile of something, you have a visual image or a visual stimulant that causes your brain to to have a picture or to think of something or be described of something. So when you see somebody, let's say you're reading a book and there is a profile or biography of an author in the sleeve of that or at the very beginning of that that tells you all about that person. If you go to a concert, you may get a profile of a person that tells you all about that person, their biography, their life, all those kinds of things. In 1 Corinthians 11:1, Paul is writing, "Be imitators of me as I am of Christ." Now Greek word for imitator. And again, all these words to me are very synonymous. The imitator, the image, the profile, anything is an image or a representation of something. Okay, so if I imitate um, something, I have something that I am copying. If I'm trying to emulate or imitate somebody's dance, and I'm not going to try to do that because I'm not. I would study them, or if I imitated their voice, I would study their voice and I would do everything to be just like them because we have people that are good at imitating others, and that of course could get them far in life if they're trying to be an entertainer. But that representation. So we have Paul is telling the Corinthian church that he wants them to imitate him because he's imitating Christ. So he is to them that imitation. Now, is when you think of what it means to imitate Christ, um, in the early Christian church, so I want to take you back to the book of Acts. Now, we did a study on the book of Acts, and if you want to go deep into the book of Acts, you can go back and look. We did a several week study on the book of Acts. So the first century church after Jesus died, crucified, you had people that were following him because of his teaching all the way up through his death, burial, and resurrection. You had people that physically witnessed his resurrection. They witnessed him um, saying to his disciples to go out and he commissioned them to go and make disciples of all nations. He sent people out into the world. So you had this great movement of people, a lot of which were not very high on the realm of society. They were, most of the disciples were people like fishermen, that like Peter, James, and John. They weren't very learned people when it came to comparing them to the Jewish leaders. And so you had the Jewish leaders who had thought that they had done away with this movement called led by Jesus because they had him crucified by the Romans. You had the Romans who were in charge politically, um, that didn't want any uprising to come that would possibly lead to their kingdom or their realm, their empire being lessened. And so that's why they were good with crucifying Jesus. And of course, you go back to why they crucified people. It wasn't just to kill them, it was to show a show of strength to other people. That's why they left them on the cross, so that other people would be deterred from doing that. So you had all of these people that witnessed Jesus being brutally murdered on the cross. They were being persecuted, and then they saw Jesus resurrected, and he commissioned them. He sent them out to go and spread the gospel out to all the world. And now you have this great movement, and even with all of the persecution, all the struggles that are going through, chapter 11, the book of Acts, you can go back and look at that, talks about this just happened with Stephen, the persecution of Stephen. Of course, Stephen was stoned. We know that Saul, who would later become Paul, one of the, not if not the greatest leader other than Jesus that we follow. Um, the Christians, and I don't want to use that term a lot here, but the followers of Christ had a lot of persecution under religious leaders such as Saul. who were doing it in the name, what they thought was in the name of God, putting these people down. And so chapter 11 talks about this is right after Saul's conversion, um, where Barnabas went to find Paul, and he brought him back to Antioch. And so for a whole year they met with the church, as I'm reading here in verse 25 and 26. For a whole year they met with the church and taught a great many people. And we have this little phrase in Antioch, the disciples were first called Christians. Now, literally, Christians really means little Christ, people that would imitate or follow, or you would know that they are of Christ because of what they did, what they said, how they, all that stuff. So you wouldn't have to ask them to show their badge and say, "Hey, I'm a Christian." You would know exactly that they're a Christian by the things that they did. Now, it's interesting that Christian is only mentioned 3 times. It's mentioned here. It's mentioned at the end of the book of Acts when Paul was before, I believe, Agrippa, where Agrippa is saying, "You want me also to become a Christian?" It's also Peter writes in First Peter and uses this, but I said all that to say Christian has, and this is going to somewhat be a little bit tough to swallow, but the word Christian to some has become negative. It has become a negative connotation when it comes to just when you say the word, or it's become a flippant word, really, because you can say, for instance, you can go and ask somebody on the street, "Hey, are you a Christian?" And they may say yes, but often they'll say, "Yes, I go to church. I go to that church down there, or I go to this church, or I give, or I'm kind to people. I am," all that stuff that we associate with whatever is associated with being a Christian. And that's the whole point of this study when it comes to really what is a Christian. And I wanted to subtitle this, and I couldn't really fit it all. But I really want us to focus on stop being Christians and start being more like Christ. And that may be offensive to some, and that may turn people off. You may say, "Okay, I'm done." But I promise you, if you'll stay with me and you'll help me dig a little bit deeper into this, this will make more sense. Because what has happened, we have equated going to church with being a Christian. We have equated giving with being a Christian. We have equated being kind, or in some ways, we have equated telling other people about what it means to be a Christian. We have teachers, we have some preachers that are even calling themselves Christian that I'm not really sure. And again, it's not my job to be the judge, and I'm not here to be the judge. I'm just telling you what is on what God has placed in my heart. You see, if I show you a tree and I say, "Well, what kind of fruit does this tree have?" And I say, "It's an apple tree." And if that tree doesn't bring out apples, it's not an apple tree. If it brings out bananas, not an apple tree, it's a banana tree. Or if I say this is an orange tree and it's giving out pears, or if I say this is a peach tree and it's not giving out any fruit, it's just bearing leaves, then it's not really showing the signs of what somebody said it was. And I hope that as we look about what it really means to be little Christ. What does it really mean to be a follower of Christ? That's where I want us to be. And we're going to talk about, in our next session, we're going to talk about Christ. We're going to talk about who he is, what he did, and that may take us more than 1 week to do. But some of us don't know really who Christ is. And we can't call ourselves Christians or followers of Christ if we don't know who Christ is. And that's the whole point of this. So, that being said, I hope I wet your whistle just a little bit. Hope I whet your appetite enough to come back and join us on the next time where we'll dive in and see exactly who this Christ is that we all claim to follow. And then in the following weeks, we're going to look about what he taught, what it really means to imitate, to emulate, to copy, to follow after. Because if we're not following after, if we don't know who he is and we're not following his example, then I don't know how we can call ourselves followers of Christ or Christians. So that's where this is going. I hope that made sense. I want to pray for us and pray for this study before we close out today. And I hope you come back next week as we dive into it a little bit deeper. Father, thank you for your word. I pray for this study as we study more about your son, Jesus, and about how we need to imitate him and follow him. Thank you for him and for his death, his burial, and his resurrection, and the hope that we have in him. And I pray that we can share that with others. And I pray that if there's some that's watching this that need to be pointed to you, God, I pray that you would lead them to call upon your name. Thank you now. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hope you have a great week, and we will see you guys next episode.